Before we get into today's video, I do want to let you guys know that this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please remember to be kind to everybody everywhere in your everyday life, in your home, in the grocery store, and especially in the comment section down below. Please do not show hate to anybody, anywhere. Good morning, my lovelies, my beauties, my friends. My name is Christina and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really hope that you will subscribe, stick around, take a chance in hearing some things that I have to say. And if you are a returning subscriber, y'all already know, y'all are my babies. So good morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody doing today? I hope you all are having an amazing day. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, a nice long weekend. I hope everybody got to relax and enjoy time with family and just spend time together. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the extremely highly requested new Netflix documentary, Keep, Sweet, Pray, and Obey. So all of y'all that have been requesting it, here we are. We are here, and it is a lot. So if you guys have not seen this documentary yet, you're in for a treat. If you have seen it, it's all good because I'm going to be telling you guys so much more than what was in the documentary. I remember watching the documentary and telling my husband, like, what? Why did they put this in? Why didn't they say this? But then again, that is television for you. I mean, they're only allowed to, add so much in, and they only get so much time. But we're going to talk about it today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best to put it all together with what I think is the most interesting and I think is the most important parts of this. And I'm going to tell you guys the story to the best of my ability based on all the public information that's already out there. And then at the very end, I will give you guys my opinion as much as I can on YouTube, but the opinions that I can't put on YouTube, those will go over on my Patreon. And if you guys don't know, I do have a Patreon. My Patreon is for 18 and up. Over there, we talk about more personal story times. We go live over there. And then we also have a $2 tier over there where all of the stuff that can't go onto YouTube, like my true crime stuff that doesn't fit in YouTube's terms and policies, we put that over there and we talk about it over there. It's always linked down in the description box along with my Instagram, my Facebook, and my second channel. So it's down there if you guys want to come check me out. Okay, one more thing I need to say before we start this. Everything that we're going to talk about in this video does not represent anybody else that is part of any of the faith, like the Mormon Church, Christians, anybody else. Okay, we're only going to be talking about the people that are in this story. It would really be upsetting if there were people that watch this video and then you go out into the real world and see, certain people and think they're all like that, because that's not true. So let's keep it what we're talking about today, and we're gonna get through this. So let's just start at the beginning. The FLDS started back in the 1800s with a young man named Joseph Smith. Now, Joseph was about 14 years old when he said he began to get visions. He talked about going into this wooded area over by his house and just getting bombarded with visions. He said that an angel came to him and told him to go over to this spot in the ground, dig a hole, and in this hole was going to be a book of golden plates. Now, on the golden plates was messages. He would later go on to say that he transcribed these messages that were on these golden plates into the English language, and that is where the Book of Mormon was born. When Joseph published this book, now obviously he's older at this point, this is when he started garnering a ton of followers. We're talking about tens of thousands of followers. I don't know what kind of visions Joseph got. I have no idea. He could have dug up a whole bunch of gold plates, could have cashed some of them in, could have wrote. I have no idea what he did, but it garnered him tens of thousands of followers right off the bat. And mind you, wasn't no social media back then. It was just word of mouth, people telling the next person and them believing in it and them going and listening to his teachings. Now, his followers then deemed Joseph to be the prophet. They all believed that God was speaking straight to Joseph, and then Joseph was relaying the messages to his people. So anything Joseph said, honey, they did, okay? Because that was basically like talking to God and Jesus himself. And then in 1830, that is when the Church of Christ was created. Now, it is said that around 1841 is when Joseph started preaching about polygamy, which was plural marriages. And he used a lot of like references from the Bible, like the Old Testament, where different people in the Bible had more than one wives. And he started preaching about how you can get to the celestial kingdom. You really needed to have 3 wives. He said that Moses had 3 wives and that to have 3 wives was the biggest honor. And then when you would pass on and go to the next life into heaven, if you had 3 wives down here, you would be in the best kingdom in heaven. So of course, the men, with some more benefits, I'm sure, really wanted to have these 3 wives. And the women also sought after being with a husband that had 3 wives, because then that meant that they were part of that as well. Now, if you didn't have 3 wives and you passed away, then you wouldn't go to the best kingdom, and your wives would end up being servants in the afterlife. So of course, everybody was working hard to get 3 wives, but it wasn't as easy as just going out and being like, hey, you want to be my wife? Okay, 1, 2, 3, bam, we're in. You had to be appointed these wives by the prophet. So you had to basically earn them. Now, they were in Utah, and about 1904 is when everything really changed for this group. The state made a law that plural marriages or polygamy was not allowed anymore. Like, it was against the law, it's not allowed. However, if you think about it, for tens of years already, people were in plural marriages. So you've got, a husband with his 3 wives, and then they all have children. All these wives have children with their husband. They're all living together. They cook together. Their lives are completely intertwined. The children consider each other brother and sister. They've been living together. They've been raised together. The children also consider all 3 moms their moms. And so now the state says, hey, this is illegal. You can't be married. And these families began to be ripped apart. Now, the issue is the church agreed with the state. The church did not want to go against what the government said. And so they quit preaching to their followers that plural marriage is what, you needed to have or you should have. And so this is where the church began to split. You had people that wanted to stay in these plural marriages. Then you had the other part of the church that wanted to follow the state, do the right thing, and do away with plural marriages. And this is where it split. Now we're going to fast forward to around 1986, when a man manipulated his way into being the president of the FLDS church, and his name was Rulon Jeffs. And this is where it really starts going haywire. Now, Rulon ended up being the president. Remember how I said like 3 wives was the ultimate goal? Well, he decided 3 wives wasn't enough, and he ended up with about 65 wives. Now, I've read different articles that said he had upwards into the 70s and 80s, but I've seen many articles say 65. Okay, he's getting older. He is an old man. No offense to my older guys out there, but he just kept pulling in wives, younger wives, younger wives. And if you're wanting to know if intimacy was involved, it absolutely was. And he had over 60 children. Of those 60 children, he had 33 sons. Now, Rulon, who is known to his followers, other than his wives and his children, as Uncle Rulon, is the one that came up with the phrase, keep sweet. Keep sweet was Rulon Jeffs' favorite phrase. And in 1991, he described the meaning of it. He said, I want you all to understand the continual use of the 2 words, keep sweet. It means to keep the Holy Spirit of the Lord until you are full of it. Only those who have it will survive the judgments of God, which are about to be poured out. Keeping sweet, no matter what, is a matter of life or death. As we approach the day of the great judgments that are to go over the earth, let us all keep it. You do not turn it off and on. It must be a permanent thing in our very nature and a part of our character. So as you guys can hear from that, this was very scary. You had to keep sweet or you were going to face the wrath of God and God's judgment. So basically what he was saying is you cannot have no bad days. He said, I don't care how many of y'all are PMSing. I don't care if you got your feelings hurt, boo-boo. I don't care how you feel. You better keep sweet. You better put a smile on your face or you are going to burn in the fiery pits of hell. So he had all these women, 65 wives, and thousands of followers feeling like or believing that they had to keep sweet at all times, no turning it on or off, no bad days, no nothing, or they would face God's judgment. So they were terrified. The people of the FLDS church lived in complete and total isolation. No contact from the outside world for the most part. I mean, you did have some of the men that went out to do different work and stuff like that, but everything that they saw, especially the young women, I mean, they went to school on these compounds. They had these big, huge compounds where everybody lived within the same compound. They were taught only what the church wanted them to know, and there was no intervention from the outside world or society at all. They didn't vote. They didn't know who the president was. They didn't know what was going on in politics. They didn't know if there was a war. They didn't know anything like that. All they knew is what the church taught them. The young girls were taught about being wives, and they were kind of treasured. But the young boys, man, the young boys always had to look over their shoulders. When you think about it, when one man is going to have multiple wives, up to 65 wives, maybe 20 wives, or even 3 wives, they were always going to need way more females than males. And so therefore, if the guys did anything wrong, they were on the chopping block. They would get exiled from the church. And what that meant was they would be kicked out. They'd be kicked out of the compound. There was even this group that was deemed, or is still deemed, the Lost Boys. And that was all the young boys. They were kicking out 14-year-old boys because they looked at a girl or because they had a crush with a girl into the desert. Bye, figure it out all by yourself. And these young boys were gone. They were any young boy that maybe seemed like he would be strong-willed or maybe, would become a problem or a threat one day, they kicked them out. Men, grown men, teenagers, anybody, the boys were so easily gone, exiled. Now, when they were exiled, they were gone from their families. They could no longer talk to their mother, their sisters, or everything that they knew in their whole entire life would be ripped away from them. And according to the teachings, they would be damned to an eternity in hell, the fiery pits of just burning forever and ever and ever. And so you can imagine how terrified these young boys and these young girls were to do anything wrong, to ever make a mistake. The young boys were also taught manual labor at a very young age. I saw interviews with young men who said that they began to drive like tractors and bulldozers at 8 years old. They worked. They worked. They went to school, but they learned very minimal of stuff. They didn't learn any like real history. They didn't learn algebra or calculus, but the girls, they learned how to cook. They learned how to change diapers. They learned stuff like that, but they dang sure didn't learn about like women's rights or, confidence or believing in themselves. It's just, they learned enough to keep the compound going. The women had to dress, I would say modestly, but that's not it. They had to dress very particularly. They had to have their hair a certain way. They had to wear dresses that literally covered them from neck to ankle. And they still do. A lot of the times they still do. And the dresses, I think the dresses are really cute. But nevertheless, they had no choice. That's what they had to wear. The wives were to obey their husbands, and the men were to work and give every bit of their money to the church. So if a man went out and created a business and he's bringing in millions of dollars, after he pays his bills, feeds his family, everything extra goes to the church. So you guys could, when they have tens of thousands of people, you can only imagine how much money the church was bringing in. It was also said that their businesses were like a force to be reckoned with because they didn't pay any of their young boys any salary. No insurance, no nothing like that. Oh, it's also said that they would later find out that 70% of the FLDS members were on food stamps. So they were getting government food stamps, 70% of them, thousands of people. They didn't even have to pay for a portion of their food because they were getting food stamps. And so the leaders or the head people of the FLDS church were bringing in millions. Girls as young as 14 at this point were being arranged to be wives, to be married. You can just imagine what the power and stuff that was happening there at this point. And we're going to get more into it later. But in 1955, Rulon, he had a son that was born. He was born 2 months premature, and this was Rulon Jeffs. Now, Rulon Jeffs would go on to be the favorite. We'll just say that. He stayed right up underneath his daddy, who was at this point, again, the prophet, right up underneath his wing, did everything his dad did, and learned a lot. Now, you can only imagine with Warren, okay, and his dad has 60 children and 65 wives. He's got a lot of mothers. Warren is daddy's boy, daddy's favorite. He's got all these moms taking care of him, cooking for him, feeding him, feeding his brothers and sisters, and this was his life. Warren would go on to graduate the high school that he went to, and then he became the principal at 21 years old at the Alta Academy, which was the FLDS's private school. Warren was allegedly just as strict, if not stricter, than his father, the prophet. He's got the power now over all of these children. Later, it would come out that Warren began calling little boys out of class, taking them into the bathroom, and doing things to them that he should not be doing, already abusing this power. It was also said that he would call the little girls out of the classroom and have them sit on his lap in the office. And later, one of his sisters would say that he did things to her that he shouldn't have done. And then also one of his daughters would later to go on to say that too, but we'll get there. When Warren would call these little boys, and we're talking about the ages of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, into the bathroom and do these things to them, he would tell the little boys that they had to do it and it was God's will. So these little boys were terrified of being sent to hell or being kicked out of the compound away from their mothers. And so they did what they were told and they kept quiet. It wouldn't be long after this that Rulon, his father, began to get sick. And Warren had his eyes on his daddy's spot. He wanted to be the prophet, the president, the one to run everything and everybody. In 2002, Rulon Jeffs passed away with his wives right by his side and his son Warren ready to slip into his spot. There was a little bit of problem with the people though. See, Rulon had told all of the people, because remember, he was a prophet, he was hearing from God, that he was going to live to be 150 years old. However, he passed away at 92. So people were super confused. I mean, they thought that he was going to come back to life. They thought that he was going to be reincarnated. And that is when Warren started basically making people believe that his father was reincarnated through him. So a lot of people just believed that Warren was the next prophet and that it was his father inside of him and da. Now, there were people that didn't believe it, but they didn't speak up because otherwise they would be exiled and be kicked off of the compound. So everybody just went along with it. And things got really weird when Warren said that he was going to take over his father's wives. The women that had raised him became his wives, and he did everything with them that a husband and a wife does. They raised this little boy, this little monster, actually. Now they were going to bed with him because they didn't want to go to hell. Ugh. Things got worse at this point for the FLDS church members because Warren, he was worse than his father. He was way stricter than his father. He started coming in and changing things. It was bad, and it was really bad for a lot of the people, but they went along with it because they did not want to upset the prophet. Now, he came in and he took over his father's 65 wives, or however many wives were left at this point, except for 2, okay? One of them ended up running away and escaping the compound. She just could not do it. And we'll talk more about her later. But as she escaped and different people began to get exiled, now that Warren had taken over, they bought this new piece of property, okay? And this would later be named the Yearning for Zion Ranch. Now, this was in 2003, and it was a 1,700-acre piece of property. Now, they told the state that this was going to be a hunting retreat, but what they did was they built a whole new compound to move the people over to. This is when Warren told his people they needed to sell their businesses, they needed to sell their houses, they needed to sell everything and move here to Zion Ranch, because the end of the world was coming, and if you were not going to be on this ranch and be serving the Lord and serving the prophet with everything you have in you, that you were going to be damned to the fiery pits of hell. So that's what people did. They sold everything that they had, any little bit of anything, and they moved to this compound. Now here they built a 29,000 square foot temple. This is it right here. Like, holy cow, did nobody in the government fly over and go, that doesn't look like a hunting camp? I mean, whoa. And in 2004, Warren, who now is the prophet, exiled 20 different men that were there. Now, when they exiled these 20 different men, all of their wives had to be rearranged. So you have these kids who have been growing up with their father, okay? And now their father's kicked out. And so now their mothers are taking them to the new husband. And now they have to call this new man daddy. I mean, it is crazy to think about. And Warren was controlling everything and everybody until the law got involved in 2004. See, one of Warren's nephews named Brett started a lawsuit against his uncle Warren for assaulting him as a little boy. Now, he had already left the ranch, and he's the one that wrote the book, The Lost Boys, and really started talking about the whole situation with all these boys being kicked out and being the lost boys and being ripped away from their families. In one of his books, he talked about every child feels special. Every child feels special until you're one of 20 children and you've got one of, 50 different moms, and you're just another person in the crowd. And so the children didn't feel special. And at this point, Warren is arranging all of the marriages from all of these people. If Warren does not set you with your husband, you won't marry that person. And of course, the men are desperately trying to get more wives. There was a 14-year-old girl who was set to marry her cousin, and she was devastated about it. She said she cried and cried and cried. She begged her mom. She even went to Uncle Warren and begged him not to make her marry her cousin. She actually said she hated her cousin. She could not stand him. He was an awful human being, but it didn't matter. He said, no, you got to marry him. So they take her to marry her cousin, and she ended up running away. She escaped the compound. And at this point, somehow, some way, she got in touch with the cops, and a warrant was put out for Warren's arrest. See, there were already people that were super suspicious about what was going on with the FLDS church, but they really couldn't do anything about it. Anytime they came to try to talk to any of the women, they would not talk to them, because all of the people on the compound believed that people out here in the free world, I mean, we are the bad guys. We are the Gentiles. We are the ones that are going to hell. We are the ones that are going to try to, knock you off of your path on your road to heaven. And so they wouldn't talk to anybody. They wouldn't talk to the cops. They wouldn't talk to investigators. And so this was their chance, because they had this young 14-year-old girl who had escaped from there, who was telling them what was going on behind the scenes. But during this time, this is when Warren goes on the run from the police. Now, when he goes on the run, y'all, he's driving a Harley Davidson. He's out living his best free life. He went to strip clubs. He was driving a Porsche. All of his people on the compound were praying for him. They were desperate. They felt like the world was out to get him. These people really believed that the persecution that was coming against their prophet was because he was the chosen one by God. So they believed in him even more, because the cops were looking for him. They were taking any little bit of money that they had, and they were giving it to him, or sending it to him, or giving it to the church. And so his run from the cops was completely funded. He didn't have to worry about anything while he's out at the clubs, riding Harley Davidsons, telling his people to pray for him even more, because God is going to deliver him from this mess. Then he became one of America's most top 10 wanted fugitives. Remember how I told y'all that one of Warren's wives, who actually was his mother at first, escaped the compound? She gave different stories of the things that she said happened, because she's seen a lot. I mean, she was the prophet that was his dad, Rulon. So she was his wife, and then she was set to become Warren's wife as well before she escaped. She said that they would have these guys that were deemed seed bearers, okay? If you guys ever seen The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, it is really good. It's not for children, but it is a really good show. The seed bearers were said or set by the prophet to have the best bloodline. So what the seed bearers would do was the prophet would tell them where they needed to go and sow their seed. Well, it could be in your wife or your wife or your wife, and they would have to come in, they would get to go into different men's homes and plant their seeds in their wives. And while they did it, the wives would have to hold the hands of their husband while the seed bearer came in and planted his seed. Yeah, y'all, this was all going on. Can you believe this? They got up to like $100,000, I believe it was, as a reward looking for Rulon Jeffs. They were pulling people over. They were just looking for him. They could not find him, but they did end up pulling over his brother in a routine traffic stop. Now, when they pulled over his brother had $142,000 cash on him, and he had $7,000 in prepaid debit cards. More and more information began to come out, and more warrants would come out for Warren. And then in August of 2006 in Nevada, Warren was pulled over driving a red Cadillac Escalade, the forbidden color, by the way. The people from the FLDS church, they were not allowed to wear red because red was the color of the devil. And here he is driving a 2007 Cadillac Escalade. He gets pulled over in 2006. So we're talking about extra brand new vehicle, just driving this red vehicle like he ain't nothing. He had 4 computers on him. He had over $50,000 worth of cash. He had one of his wives, which she should be in jail too, in my opinion. He had 16 cell phones on him, 16, 3 wigs, all kinds of disguises, but they got him at this point, and now he goes into custody and he's in the jail. This man, Warren, at this point, is running the church from inside the jail. Oh yeah. The people are coming to see him. He's writing letters, writing books, and all of these people are still working, giving all their money to the church and doing everything he says while he is behind bars. In 2007, he tried to hang himself, and he's still alive. He survived it. But things really took a huge, drastic turn in 2008 when a DV hotline got a phone call from an anonymous girl who said she was 16 years old, she was living on the Zion Ranch compound, and that she was being AR'd and forced to be married. Well, it turned out later on that this was like a hoax call. It was by a woman that actually did a bunch of these calls, but it was just enough for investigators to get a warrant to go in and search the Zion Ranch, the 1,700-acre compound that had been built and designed by Rulon Jeffs himself. This was a large-scale operation, and they were not expecting to find what they found. There was 462 children. They thought at max there was 500 people on this compound. There was 462 children alone. 25 mothers under the age of 18. 25. There were 53 girls between the ages of 14 and 17, and 31 of those 53 girls were either pregnant or had been pregnant before. Yes. Disgusting. When they went into the temple, the things that they found, you guys, they found this white bed that was like this altar. You guys see this photo right here. And what was going on in this place, this disgusting all white torture chamber, was when Warren would allow somebody to have a wife, a child wife at that, a 14-year-old young girl that they would be married to their husband. The husband would need to do husband things with the child on this bed-like altar while people would kneel and watch and sit and watch. Unbelievably disgusting and horrible and just evil. There was a vault in this temple, and they were able to get in, and when they got in, the stuff that they found, again, they weren't prepared for. Rulon Jeffs actually recorded and documented everything that he did. There were journals in there. There was recordings in there of him with his wives that you would just not even believe, just disgusting, horrible stuff. But in it was the smoking gun. It was a recording of Rulon Jeffs being with his 12-year-old wife, victim, okay? She ended up getting pregnant, but he recorded the whole thing of him teaching her what she needed to do. On the recording, you can actually hear him telling this young girl to feel the presence of God. Do you feel that? Disgusting. There's photos like of this right here of the young girl pregnant. And what's even worse, which I don't know if there's anything that could be worse, it's all horrible, was that his other wives, Warren, would kneel and watch him do these things to these children. And they would all act like this was some sort of like blessing from God. It was horrible. Long story short, he ended up getting convicted of all of this stuff. He ended up with life plus 20 years in prison, and he's in prison right now. I mean, he's been sick. He's went into a coma from not eating because he's fasting, thinking he's going to get out. Horrible, horrible, horrible. All of it's so horrible. And he's still controlling a lot of the church from in prison to this day. So what do I think about all of it? I think it's absolutely horribly disgusting. I think evil people will come in and destroy anything. They'll destroy people's faith. They'll destroy people's dignity, their beliefs. They'll destroy the government. They'll destroy anything where greed can get in and power can get in. It's just unbelievable how far this went and how brainwashed these people are. And a lot of them still are. So many of them still believe that he was wrongly accused. One of his sons actually took his own life in 2019. He said that his dad began to do stuff to him when he was 5 and 6 years old. He came out and spoke about it, but it's like he couldn't live with it. It was just too much, and he took his own life. I mean, this man, oh my gosh. So what do you guys think? Have you heard about this? Have you seen the documentary? You can just only imagine what all more investigators know. It's gotta be a lot. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I love you guys. I will see y'all next week. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, guys. Bye.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're